Hello, I'm Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Welcome to another episode of Future First, Focus on Broward's Children. In this episode, we'll be tackling human trafficking, a subject that some may think belongs to another place and time. Sadly, it is in fact a very current problem, a modern-day form of slavery that in our part of the world is far too prevalent. It involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act against adults and children of both sexes. Every year, millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide, including right here in South Florida. Lest you think that only certain vulnerable populations are affected, statistics show that it can happen in any community, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. Traffickers might use violence, manipulation, or false promises of well-paying jobs or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situations. As this show focuses on Broward's children, today we'll focus on a particularly horrible form of human trafficking, the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Here to discuss with me the insidious nature of human trafficking and how it may affect children and youth are Jumorrow Johnson, Human Trafficking Coordinator for the Office of the State Attorney, 17th Judicial District, as well as President of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition. Marya Meyer, 1 Billion Rising Miami Coordinator and Vice Chair of the Women's Fund of Miami-Dade Board of Directors. Lisa Manns, Executive Director of Katallage House, and Tabitha Bush, a Programs Manager at the Children's Services Council of Broward County, who has been working on this issue for many years. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Jumorrow, I want to start with you. As the chair of the Broward Human Trafficking Task Force, can you explain a little bit what human trafficking is and how it shows up for the children in Broward County?
Great. Thank you, Sydney. That's a really great question. So people have this misconception that human trafficking looks like one thing and it is one thing, and it's not. It looks like my child, it looks like your child, it looks like all of our children here in Broward County. So for Broward County, human trafficking looks like 201 calls made to the hotline in 2019 in reference to allegations of children being trafficked in Broward. Wow. Of that 201 calls, 60 of those children were verified as being trafficked. That's what trafficking looks like in Broward County. Trafficking does not discriminate, doesn't care where the child lives, what side of the tracks they live on, how much money their parents make, what kind of car they drive. It does not. Trafficking is about two things. It's about exploitation and it's about profit. And the thing that drives trafficking that people need to understand is demand. If we can stop men from buying women and children for sex, then we may be able to put a dent in what is happening in our, not just in our world, but in our community.
Wow. I want to talk to Lisa as the mother of a survivor, but just before I go there, 201 calls.
Yes.
Who's making those calls?
So I can attribute that. We can look at it two things. I choose to be optimistic about it because it could be that the awareness and the education that we're doing, all of the footwork that we're doing of making people aware of what's going on, that is attributing to the calls. So for 2019, 201 calls came in alleging some form of maltreatment or trafficking or suspected trafficking or grooming of children. So for Broward County, what we do here is, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but we count our kids here in Broward. So 2 Thursdays out of a month, we, a group of providers, we have human trafficking, CSEC, which is commercial sexual exploitation of children. We have staffings 2 Thursdays a month at the Broward Sheriff's Office CPS building. And so at these staffings, it gives us an opportunity to review these calls that are coming in, look at what's going on with these children, look at what's going on, not just with them now, but looking at what we missed and how we dropped the ball. Because in a lot of these cases, when we go back and we look at them, we'll see maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, there were some calls that came into the hotline alleging some form of sexual abuse, some form of physical abuse, some form of something. but it was unsubstantiated. There were no findings. Therefore, the child was left in the house. And we need to understand that just because you can't prove it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so we are seeing that in a lot of the kids that we are staffing. We are seeing a lot of peer recruitment, which is something that we really need to be aware of and that we need to look at.
Like that's been in the news a lot, the Jeffrey Epstein situation where peers, right? I'm assuming that's what you meant, where another child is recruiting.
That's correct.
Another child.
That's correct. And you can look at that because you're like, well, why would a child do that? Well, you know what? When you start talking about an imbalance of power in a relationship between an adult and a child, you start talking about the creation of a trauma bond. And so when a child creates a trauma bond with its abuser, with its perpetrator, and that imbalance of power and that need to be accepted, and to please them, you have the opportunity where the child will say, well, if I can make him happy, if I can bring him somebody that he thinks is going to make some money, then two things. One, he'll be nicer to me. Two, I won't have to work as much. So there's so many different things that's encompassed, and there's so many different mechanisms and thought processes that are at work in this really sadistic game of trafficking. Traffickers and pimps usually target younger girls and younger boys, because boys are trafficked as well, because they're easier to manipulate. And you have to understand that we all have a vulnerability. Some of us are just better at managing our vulnerabilities than others, right? When you're not good at managing what your vulnerabilities are, and a predator understands that, then you become prime prey for them. And this is what's happening to a lot of our girls. In Broward County, the majority of our girls in Broward County, while kids are being, yes, are kids being kidnapped or kids being forced into it? Absolutely. But the majority of our kids in Broward County are being Romeo pimped into the game. They're being finessed.
You know, it worries me a lot. I'm a mom of a 13-year-old, and I see how the insecurity is manifesting itself, and it's a bottomless pit of insecurity. And so you could see how they could be ripe for someone who feeds that and counteracts that just incessant, no matter what I say as mom.
Right.
There's a big well.
Well, because you're mom, you have to say, the
Right.
nice things, And with Lisa's daughter, and working with Lisa's family, I remember Lisa saying to me one day, I never thought that this would happen to us. This would make it to our house, because we're not this kind of people.
So Lisa, let's talk about that. You're the mom of a survivor, and yay, she's a survivor, thank God.
Yes.
How did you find out what was going on, and what was that like for your family?
Wow. She met him at a high school football game, and she was introduced to him through a friend of hers. He actually liked her friend. And because the friend saw things she didn't like about him, she didn't respond to that invitation. However, my daughter did. And Jumorrow spoke about vulnerabilities. And we all have vulnerabilities as adults and children. And my daughter had a vulnerability. And it's so important as parents that we address these vulnerabilities and we build our children up. And it's difficult, as you said, being the mom, to do that, because they really don't take that from us very well. It's easier for somebody like a friend or somebody else to build them up, and it's more receptive to them, for them to believe what's being told to them. And my daughter had this vulnerability because she was raped in middle school. So the introduction to sex to her was already violent. And so that's what stayed with her. And though she went to therapy, she was too young to really understand what happened. So the therapy didn't really help her. So she had this insecurity. She had this experience, this horrible experience, and that's what she was going with. And here she met this young man that promised her a wonderful relationship. And when she was recruited under the influence that she was going to have a beautiful relationship with him. And he somehow made her feel like, you don't have to do this. She knew what he was doing. She had an idea of what he was doing, but she did not have to do it. And that's how he started grooming her. You're better than this. You don't have to do this. But he worked on her trust. He wanted to get her to totally trust him and believe everything that he was saying. And he got to the point where he even came into our home and met the family. Wow. So here, he comes into our house. He's introduced to us as her boyfriend. She introduces him, Mom, Dad, this is my boyfriend. And you know, and I really like him, and I want you guys to get to know him. So he tells my husband that he has a 2-year-old daughter. So my husband sits this young man down and speaks to him about being a father. And they start kicking the you know, what he's going through, you know, his 2-year-old daughter, what he's experiencing, the way she's growing up so fast, and they start having this dialogue. What he was doing was he was watching everyone in my house, seeing the type of connection that my daughter had with me, the connection my daughter had with my mother, because we're the caretakers of my parents, they're elderly. He was seeing the type of emotions that she had and connection she had with every family member, so that he could recognize who was the one she was closest to. Because that was going to be the person that he would threaten to harm to get her to do whatever he wanted her to do.
Oh my God. So
he came in knowing why he was there. My daughter at the time didn't know that, didn't understand that. She felt that he really wanted to meet the family, but his role was actually to be able to manipulate her and control her. And what better way to do that than to know the people she's close to and know the people she loves?
Wow.
Because that's how you're going to get her to do everything you want her to do and have that control over her. And so they started dating, and he was grooming her. We didn't realize she was being groomed until she told us she was going out with a friend of ours from church, because he was going into the service and they were having a farewell party for him. She was going to that party. So it's getting really late, and I called her, and she didn't answer her phone. And so I called him, the person that was having the party, and I said, "Hey, is she there?" And he says, "No, she never came." And I was like, "What do you mean she didn't come?" And he was like, she just didn't come. And I told my husband, I said, "Sweetie, she's not there. We don't know where she's at." And my husband called her, and when he called her, she answered the phone. And she said, "Oh, I'm in a hotel, and I'm just having a party with a few friends." So my husband says, "Well, I'm on my way there to pick you up. Send me your location." And so we both went to the hotel. And when our daughter walked out of this hotel, she was dressed in a way that I didn't recognize her. She had makeup on that I didn't even know she wore makeup like that. And I was like, "What is going on?" I was like, "What is this? What happened to you? Why do you look this way?" My husband knew automatically. He knew right away. My husband has a history, so there's things that he can recognize. And he said, "We're going home." So we took her home, and he grabbed her phone. And when he took her phone, there was phone calls coming in. And there were text messages coming in. And there were text messages like, "What would you charge for this? What do you charge for that?" And my husband looked at her and said, "Is this what you're doing?" I still didn't know what was going on. I was like, "What are you talking about?" It didn't click. It didn't click to me. And he's like, "Tell me, is this what you're doing?" And at first she was like, "Oh no, that was another girl that was there. She used my number instead." And my husband said, "No, you're lying." He was like, "You have 2 seconds to tell me." And so it came out, and he said, you cannot stay here if you're going to do that, which was our biggest mistake because we really didn't understand what was going on, and we didn't know that at that point we were just handing her over.
Oh my God.
You know? And so, of course, I'm in agreement with him because I don't know what human trafficking is. I don't understand what a trauma bond is. I don't know what's going on with her, you know, psyche. I don't know why she's addicted to these drugs now. I don't know. I'm totally lost, just lost. So the next morning she got up and she walked out. So he groomed her at 17. There's something that he told me during this whole time of her being trafficked. He says, I was coming in your house and grooming her every night, and you guys didn't know that.
He was coming into your house without you knowing?
Without us knowing. And I was like, what? He says, I was coming in your house every night and grooming her, and you guys had no idea. We had no idea. Wow. We did not know.
So how did you get her out?
My daughter was in the lifestyle for 3 years. She was
3 years.
She was trafficked for 3 years. For those 3 years, I got to know her detective very well. The first time that she was rescued and they brought her home, she gave an 8-hour testimony, 8 hours of, I don't know, just information about the pimp to this detective. And he came to us and he said she made him the most money, she got the most beatings, and you need to send her out of here. And, you know, thank God we had the resources that we were able to send her to another state, and a lot of people don't have those resources. And thank God that we did. But he was incarcerated for a domestic violence incident, and when she was away, he called his mother, and his mother called her. And they had a 3-way conversation.
And they pulled her back?
And so she came back to Florida. They convinced her to come back. And when she came back, she went directly into the hotels. So what my husband and I were doing was driving to these hotels every night to see if we could see her, because she wasn't allowed to call us. She could only call us when she was, I guess, a good girl, when she did everything she was supposed to do right for him. When she had enough sex, when she made the quota for the night, when she didn't answer him back. And so we would go, we knew the hotels that she was working out of. We would look on Backpage to see when she was working, because she would post when they work. And so we knew the hours she was working. We knew how many hours she was working. My husband turned around at one point and says, he worked her for 15 hours. Oh. And I was like, how much sex can a person have in 15 hours? I was getting emergency bills to my house, so I knew every time she was beaten. I knew every time she was hurt, because the bills were coming to my house, because the address was our home. So we knew when she was hurt, and I didn't know how to help. And in the meantime, I had Jumorrow trying to educate me and teach me about the trauma bond and her going back and what that means, and the drugs, and I just wasn't ready to receive all of that. It was overwhelming for me.
That had to be excruciating as a mom. I can't even imagine. But I hate to cut you off, but I want to hear about how you got support and got her out. Tabby, I understand you were involved in supporting her daughter.
Yes, so at the time when I met Lisa, I was working for an organization that provided services for girls in Broward County who had history of DJJ and vulnerability, and Jumorrow and I kind of collaborated together to kind of enroll her into the services, but she wouldn't. She refused the services.
She refused.
However, because we were so consistent with trying to engage her in services in spite of what she was going through, that was one of the things that we kind of connected with Lisa on, is providing that additional support for her.
And eventually, since she's a survivor, and I know she's a survivor, I'm so relieved to know there's a happy ending to the story. Was it the consistency of the outreach that eventually turned the corner, or?
Yeah, it was definitely the consistency, and she and I still communicate on a regular basis now. And the key word is consistency. When you're working with children, when you're working with survivors of trafficking, children in particular, consistency is very important, and it's so important for you to understand that you have to meet them where they are. It can't be convenient for you. And when people don't understand the trauma that is attached to constant victimization, day in, day out, he's nice to me when I do this. If I mess up, then I'm going to be beaten. Lisa's daughter was brutalized. I mean, brutalized. There were marks on her body that you couldn't even imagine.
I just want to say this in conjunction to what you're saying. My daughter, one time when she was home, she took a shower, and I went in the bathroom, and she had missing flesh from her body. And I broke down, and I lost it. And she's holding me up, and she's saying, "Mom, I'm okay. I'm home. I'm home now. I'm okay." I mean, I couldn't understand the extent of that. So when Jumorrow says that these victims are brutally beaten, they are. And I don't know everything, and I will never. Jumorrow knows more about what happened to my daughter than I will. And thank God she'll never share that with me. Because as a mother, it's very difficult to handle that.
And so, going back to the consistency and understanding that survivors and victims of trafficking are waiting for you to drop them. They're waiting on you to walk out just like everybody else, because they have been told by their pimp and their trafficker that nobody's going to want them. No one's going to love them the way that they're going to love them. They will continue to accept them even though they've slept with 25, 30, 35 men a night. It doesn't matter. They'll still love them, but the outside world, society, will not love them. So, you know what? This is really the best it's ever going to get. So it's, he beats me, he lies to me, he dopes me up, but you know what? At least he's consistent. I know how to do this. And the mistake that we make with providing services is that sometimes we ourselves, we become worse than the pimps and the traffickers, because we put expectations on them.
Yes.
We put expectations on them that they are not capable at that time of meeting and not capable of understanding. So if you have a young lady, I'm going to give you an example. If you have a teenage girl or a teenage boy that is in a trafficking situation and they've missed, let's say, 30, 45 days of school, right? They get into the position where, okay, they're coming out. There's going to be ambivalence, right? Because we understand the stages of change, right? So there's going to be ambivalence there. So let's say they go to school for a week and a half straight, don't miss a day, and then they have a bad day. Something triggers them. They smell something that reminds them of a John. They hear keys rattling in their pocket that reminds them of the pimp, and they can't cope that particular day, so that day they skip. And then we as the service providers hold them accountable and punish them for that, right? Without understanding that we need to start focusing on not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Right.
And when we can understand that and stop providing services and assistance when it's convenient for us, and stop expecting them to be grateful, because listen, I have been cursed out, like, let me tell you something. I have been called so many names and cursed out, and I mean, you can't believe it. But you know what? I understand that it's not about me. I don't take it personal. And we as service providers, and I need the service providers to understand, it's not about you. They don't know you. You just happen to be there. And you always also got to understand, Cindy, that you're only dealing with that issue right there before you. What about all the other crap that's happened to these children before that point?
Before that point, exactly.
They're coming in carrying all of that stuff. You're dealing with this one issue. Okay, we pull them out of a hotel. We're looking on the back page. We're looking at the ad. Well, back page is gone. We're looking at the ads. They've posted 15 ads a night. Okay, so probably there's been about maybe 20, 25 customers that night. You pull them out of that. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to be touched. Nobody wants to be helped. They just want to be left alone.
I think that's something that would be surprising. I know it's surprising to me, and I imagine others watching would probably be surprised at the thought that they wouldn't be happy to have someone, I don't want to rescue, I guess, that you can't imagine being comfortable with. I mean, I hear you, and I the manipulation, the fact that the brainwashing could be so strong that they wouldn't look at somebody coming in and saying, you don't have to do this anymore. There's another path, wouldn't be like, oh, thank God, because this was just awful.
I wanted to add, I'm sorry, Lisa, on what Jumorrow said, because on the other side of consistency is you can't pass any judgment.
Right.
And a lot of times, you know, even being sometimes guilty of myself being a service provider, you know, saying that, okay, this is supposed to happen to this particular population. So we have to understand that passing judgment makes it even more difficult for the victim because they're already thinking to themselves, this is what this person thinks of me. This person know what I did last night or early this morning, or even before I came to receive services. So not only as a service provider, we have to be consistent, we also have to be non-judgmental.
Right.
And back to what you said, Cindy, there's a big difference between a person wanting help and a person trusting help.
Right.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Marya, I want to get you into the conversation.
Well, I think your viewers have entered in the conversation because of the generosity of Lisa's story and everything that's been told here. So if you can see one individual human following that path, we as community members, we can see a lot of people. They say that human trafficking is hidden in plain sight because a lot of those people that you're looking at and you're judging, you're saying, they're one of those. Actually, now you have entered, by one example, into what everybody in our community who's suffering from this. So as we step back as community members and we start to relate again, we can say, don't be scared, be prepared. Right. Ignorance is most definitely not bliss. The trafficking budget projected for the United States is a $32 billion industry, $150 billion globally. And we need more stats. And policymakers and people who provide services, we need your help in getting stats because that will help inform policy. There is science. We were talking earlier in the green room about PTSD, why people wouldn't, exactly like you just said, Cindy, would not say, please help recover me and bring me back. PTSD in people who've been in military service and people who've been trafficked, very, very, very similar. There is science that can take us leaps and bounds forward. What can we do here locally? We can take from the micro, which is understanding what Lisa just taught us all, is that we have to love our loved ones, no matter how they are, our youth. I remember one of the great HSI, Vic Williams, who's worked with many of us, is one of our many mentors. I said, Vic, what is the best thing that we can do to prevent our children from being trafficked? Take them back no matter what. Tell them that you're going to love them no matter what, and they can tell you anything. As we're trying to give structure to our youth, whether it's your church, your faith-based community, whether it's your school, whether you're being a parent, you want to give them, there's some rules for life. You should step up to this, you should step up to that. They need to know if they didn't make those marks and something happened to them,
Okay.
they are not going to be able to be manipulated by that person who put them in that vulnerable position. So yes, this is the only companion community that I can be with anymore, because that's all I'm worth.
Right.
That's all I deserve. And only my people over here who've done the same kind of work, who have lived that, what we could call in some communities, shame or sin or mistakes, then we're giving them over to the quote unquote bad guys.
You know, I think that bears repeating for the parents out there. And we're constantly juggling, you know, you want to have aspirations for your children and you want to inspire them to aspire to great things. But it is important for them to know that if they don't reach the heights, that doesn't mean that they're the depths. That we, you know, yes, of course, I want you to get A's and B's, and I want you to go to college, and I want you to have a full life, or whatever you aspire for them to be. But if they come home with that C or D, it's not the end of their life. You will love them no matter what. You know, separate the actions from the child and let them know that no matter what they've done, they still have your love and support, so that, just like you said, the bad people can't get in between you.
Extreme, as you said, it could be that my child skipped school.
Right.
Right.
So my kid skipped school and they went to the mall, and some cute guy and his sister came by. You guys want to go smoke some weed? We're having fun. Let's go. And then they are compromised. They are partying. They might be drugged. Compromising photos might have been taken, etc. And so your parents are not going to
That's one way.
believe
They're
you.
not going to like it.
They're not going to like it.
Including them.
But we need
they're
to
not
take them
going
back.
to. They're
because
not
otherwise-
going to throw you out of the house because of it.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm sorry.
But I think what's important that is the healing process that they go through once they're rescued. And this is very important because it's a very slow process. And even during that time, and speaking through my own experience with my daughter, she was in and out quite a few times. I would call Jumorrow, like, I don't understand what she's doing. I mean, it was a while for her to finally stay out. My daughter went to the Airline Academy School. She earned her wings. Flight attendant. She was away for months because she was in the school. Graduated, and you know, when she came home, he called her and she went out. So, and I'm saying this because I think it's important that as caretakers, as parents, that we understand when you talk about loving them unconditionally, you have to love them unconditionally. I did not understand why she went back out. I was confused about that. She was away for so long. But it's a part of the trauma bond. It's a part of the process. And we have to know how to embrace that and still help her. I had to learn how to help her through that. So I had to learn how to still be there for her. I had to learn how to welcome those phone calls and watch what I said on that phone, because whatever I said, I did not want her to get beaten because I said something, that upset him. When my daughter would visit us, she had to keep him on the phone. He had to hear that whole conversation. He had to hear everything that was being told to her and what she was telling us, just so he knew that she wasn't setting up an escape plan. She wasn't setting him up to get arrested. And we had to love her through that. And it was very hard. I mean, when I tell you that I had to learn everything about human trafficking, has nothing on domestic violence and substance abuse in my eyes, because I had to learn things that I didn't even know about psychologically to figure out, how do I meet my daughter where she's at and let her know that I love her and she's welcome in this house anytime. This door is always open.
A couple of times you've mentioned the trauma bond, and I don't think we've really explained it. Jumorrow, do you want to talk about what that is and what you were teaching, Lisa?
Sure. So trauma bond is very, I mean, some people call it Stockholm Syndrome, where you start to sympathize with your abuser, and at one point you not just sympathize with them, you start to show empathy and affection for them. Understanding the tactics of a pimper and a trafficker are not that different from that of a domestic violence abuser. They're both very charming, charismatic. They're both very narcissistic. They're both very brutal. They both have experience severe mood swings. They both will always make themselves out to be the victim. And what will happen is that, and they both use gaslighting. They reflect everything back on the victim. Their behavior is always the fault of the victim. If you would have just, if you wouldn't have just, if you would just be better or do this or not do that, then I would not have to abuse you. It's the same, it's like the same dynamic. And so what happens is when you're talking about trauma bonding, and like I said earlier, you're talking about an imbalance of power where you have small kindnesses. You have extreme violence, and then they'll be met by small kindnesses. And so what happens is that you then become so grateful for those small kindnesses, right? Because you're seeing a glimmer of what this person not could be, but was when you first encountered them, right? So it's very confusing and manipulating and very methodical type of thing that is used here, which is why it's really hard to separate. Once that trauma bond is formed, it's really hard to separate that because it's very confusing. Well, I know, I've had girls in my office, he cracked my ocular bone, my eye's hanging, my retina's detached, my nose is broken, but you know what, Ms. J? He could have killed me, but he didn't, so that means he still cares about me.
Oh, God.
Right? And so it's, true story. I mean, and it's unimaginable, but it's real. I mean, this is real life, and this is the real life thought process of someone that is grateful that someone who says they care about them didn't kill them. And that's how that works.
Jumorrow brought up a word, and I want to talk a little bit about it, gaslighting. And I just pretty much learned about that word through my daughter and what she was experiencing. Because I asked my daughter one day, I said, how did you get up and do what you had to do every day without, feeling normal? Like, how did you get up and do this? And she says, how do you and Daddy get up every day and go to work? She says, that's exactly what I did. She says, it was a job. She says, I got up every day and I went to work. And I chose to do that. And I looked at her and I said, you chose to do that? She says, yeah, I chose to do that. I was in agreement. That's gaslighting. He made her believe that everything she did, she chose to do. And that's one reason why it took so long for her to get into therapy and care, because she was never able to identify that as he manipulated me, he coerced me, he forced me. She was never able to attach those methods to it because he had her under the belief that, hey, you're willing to do this. That's exactly what gaslighting is.
And so, and that was a lot of shame, and with working with Lisa's daughter, there was a lot of shame, in her case, and she really blamed herself because, and like Lisa said, there are conversations that we've had that Lisa will never ever know about. But there were times where, she, she really blamed herself because it's like, but if I had, then this never would have happened. Or if I would have left when we were there, then maybe it would have been over, And so what happens is that, and then she would say his name. Well, he said that, and he said that. Or he said, and these are conversations that she and I are having. And so it's what happens is that his voice becomes her voice in her head. right? And so everything that he is saying to her becomes her truth about who she is. Because for him, he's telling her, well, if you were really such a good person, and you're really such a good girl, and if you were really such the princess your parents think you were, then you would not have allowed me
Right.
to do this. I wouldn't have been able to do this.
Yeah.
So I want to turn the conversation just a little bit, because all of you are now working to end this, and it's one child at a time, it's one rescue at a time, but you are in positions where you're working collaboratively to put in place some things to help educate, as we're doing today, to get people to make those calls. So let's talk about what the system is doing. You're now at the state attorney's office.
Yes.
And what is the state attorney doing to stop
So
trafficking?
I'm glad you asked that. Mr. Michael Statz is doing an amazing job on his end in tackling human trafficking. The state attorney's office has created a human trafficking task force. And the task force is comprised of law enforcement. And so the task force it's the Broward County Human Trafficking Task Force under the creation of the Broward County State Attorney's Office. And so it consists of the FBI, Fort Lauderdale Police Department, Plantation Police Department, Coral Springs Police Department, Miramar Police Department, and BSO. The State Attorney's Office has a prosecutor that has been identified to prosecute only human trafficking cases. So that's what she does. And we also are in collaboration with the United States Attorney's Office.
Let me just stop you for 1 second, I'm sorry. But now, when you say prosecute human trafficking cases, are you talking about the children who have been trafficked or the perpetrators of the trafficking?
The perpetrators of the trafficking.
Okay, good.
So, and that's
an
my
attitude shift,
right,
right?
and that's my and good segue, Cindy.
Okay,
So
there you go. I have learned something over these last few years.
our task force is victim-centered approach, right? Because you're right, for a long time, and still in some municipalities, in some counties, in some areas, survivors are treated as criminals, right? They're treated as the perpetrator, and they're arrested and they're put in jail. Where our task force is victim-centered, we've collaborated. We have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with the Nancy J. Cotterman Center, which is the only certified rape crisis center in Broward, and they are partners with us, and they are our direct care service provider for all of our trafficking survivors. And so they work very closely with us in making sure that the survivors are connected with the appropriate services, that they're getting the appropriate treatment, whether it be physical, whether it be psychological, the therapeutic piece, the trauma-informed care piece. If there is a service that is out of their scope, they are taking the initiative to refer to a reputable organization or reputable agency that will be able to provide that service. And the great thing about our task force is that when I say we are collaborating with the United States Attorney's Office, we do that because you do know trafficking cases can be prosecuted both federal and state. So we work very closely with the United States Attorney's Office in our office, and they staff the cases. How is the prosecution of this case going to best serve the survivor? What's in the best interest of the survivor? Should this case be prosecuted federally, or should it, and so when we're talking about victim-centered approach, you literally have to mean you're putting the thought, the care, the treatment, and the survival of the victim is at the forefront. Right. So it's about accountability, but it's also about making sure this person that was victimized is understanding that they have a system that truly cares about them and believes them.
And now there's a human trafficking court that's getting underway in Broward County.
Yes, thanks to Judge Ross, who is amazing.
Yes.
Judge Stacey Ross is amazing. So there's Girls Court and there's Rise Court in Broward County, and Judge Stacey Ross is the spearhead behind that. She's amazing. She's a very good partner with the State Attorney's Office as far as making sure that the children, the youth, boys and girls, that are affected by trafficking by way of being actually trafficked, and understanding those that are in the process of being groomed. Because prevention is also very, very, very important, and making sure those mechanisms are put in place so that they don't fall so deep in that, you know, we can't get them back. And so the girls' court and the RISE court focuses specifically on those youth, those girls and boys that have been identified as trafficked or in the process have been identified as being, you know, groomed for trafficking. And it's not about handing out community service hours. It's not about being punitive. It's about meeting the need of the child and meeting the holistic need of the child, and understanding that we're not just here about this one thing, you know, but there's something else going on, something happened, and that's why you're here, and we've taken the responsibility to find out what it is.
Thank you. In Marya, in Miami, the Women's Fund is also taking a big role in this.
Absolutely, and we have to say that we all work together very closely because they're all of our babies. And the traffickers definitely do not know the Broward-Dade line. We all need to work really, really closely together. Women's Fund has had really high profile this year because everywhere that the Super Bowl goes, the NFL Foundation elects one organization to work with a coordination of all of the different entities, public and private, who are interested in working with trafficking. So I was doing the official outreach of the Super Bowl host committee with the state attorney's office and my Women's Fund Miami-Dade, which I'm vice chair, and all of the law enforcement. As Jumorrow was saying before, it is absolutely essential that all law enforcement entities work together and we coordinate. It's not up to the victim and it's not up to the people who are being groomed. We all need to work together ahead of time, and communication is key. So the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force and the Miami-Dade Human Trafficking Coalition, they work closely together. There's cross-pollination with Broward, public, private. It's really, really essential that we support our law enforcement, that funding be given. funding. It is essential. And I have a few asks for the audience.
Okay.
I actually became involved as a regular grassroots. As a mother, I come from the music business. I've been socially aware and active in lots of things throughout my life. But when this crossed my path, I said, okay, I get it. And a lot of smart people didn't know before. Our state attorney in Miami in 2012 had 3 human trafficking cases. She thought, well, it's prostitution. They all thought, oh, that's what that is. They have almost 500 cases now. The way the trauma-informed care has radically changed. If you didn't know about this before today, you're in great company. A lot of brilliant people didn't know this was going on. They didn't understand the humanity of a single case, and they didn't understand the prevalence. So my ask is that every single individual, regular people, become informed. Don't say it's not your business. It will cross your path, and it might be at the nail salon, and it might be at somebody's bachelor party. We can take a big lop out of this by regular people understanding what's going on and supporting, you know, she can come in with her super heroin cape, but we have to call the number. And we have to look at others as individuals, as human beings, as they go by. I have to say there are really good services. There are national hotline numbers. There are local numbers. I know you're all going to share some of those. I'd like to say that not everybody who hears this will necessarily still identify, but we've got some other things for you. So this is big business. It used to be drug trafficking, arms trafficking. Now, sex trafficking and human trafficking are overcoming the arms trafficking because you can sell drugs once and you got to get some more. You can sell guns and you have to go get some more. And if you're busted, there are the drugs, there are the illegal guns. With a human, if they're traumatized and they're not willing to testify because they've got Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bond with their pimp,
right.
those people get sold again and again and again. And if you think those people are paying taxes, well, they certainly are not. And if you think that we're not going to give survivors every single bit of services that they need, we're also wrong, because we're going to do it, and that's expensive. Yeah. So if you don't get your heartstrings touched, maybe you want to look at your budget. There are many, many different ways to look at this, but this is a current, true crisis. It's growing.
It's growing
It's
badly.
easier and easier to manipulate youth, because if your cerebral cortex is not done until you're 24, until you're 24, and the majority of people who are getting pushed, groomed into what you could call prostitution are between 12 and 14. They're going for our kids. And the majority of the people who are working in that business now are around that age of under 24.
Right.
This is our economy. These are our babies. This is our public health. And now that we know, we need to go, and we need to go together. Whatever angle, but please do join us.
You know, there's a slogan that we have in human trafficking, and I love it. It's see something, say something. I live by that. See something, say something. It's, if you're not sure, just call the hotline. Just report it and let them do the investigation. Let them keep that information, because if we're not making the call, then we're not helping to save a soul. These victims cannot get themselves out of it. They don't know how. They don't even understand what's going on with them. So we have to be the ones to come and try and open that door to rescue them. And the best way we can do that is by calling. We cannot go and rescue somebody from a hotel. I would never recommend that. Jumorrow says you don't do that. We are not the FBI. We are not Homeland Security. We do not save people like that. But our responsibility is to call. Our responsibility is that if we see it, we say it, and we call.
So I'm going to give out all of those numbers in just a moment, but in the last couple of minutes, I'm sure anyone watching has now been inspired, but what are the, let's say, 3 things that should trigger them to make a call? We see people all the time. Yes, the obvious hooker on the corner, you might be able to say, okay, I see that happening. But in your nail salon or elsewhere, how are you going to recognize that a call needs to be made? What are the signs you should be watching for?
Go ahead, Tab.
Oh, Tabby.
So for me, because I'm always in a nail salon, I always ask to go to use their bathroom. And the reason why I do that is because if I see beds, clothing, any articles that should not be there, that is a red flag for me. The other thing that I also notice too is that if I see a young girl with an older adult, and if my gut tells me something isn't right, then that is another red flag for me. The most important thing that I've experienced personally is driving, where I've saw a young girl jump out of a car and put a white-looking motel card in the back of her pocket. So, like Lisa said, when you see something, say something, and when it looks really suspicious and it gives you that feeling like something isn't right, you can always call the 1-800-96-ABUSE line and just give them a location of where you are and what you saw.
Interesting.
And so other things that parents can look out for. Parents can be vigilant and they can be proactive. How many cell phones does your children have?
One.
Right, the one that you purchase, right?
Right.
So, you know, say you find 2 cell phones. Your kid has 2 cell phones. What do they have 2 cell phones for? There are 21 apps that parents need to be aware of. Get yourself knowledgeable about those apps. Make sure you're looking at the front of your child's phone to see if any of these concerning apps are on your child's phones. There's a calculator app out there that looks like a calculator, but actually it's not. It's actually a secret compartment that kids hide inappropriate videos and explicit photos of themselves behind, and it looks like a regular. It looks
What's
like
it
the
called?
calculator, the calculator app.
It's called the calculator
Yes,
app?
but every smartphone comes with one calculator on there, right?
Right.
So why does your child have 2 calculator apps on their phone? When your child circle of friends change, when you have older people, and I'm not saying 30, 35, 40, I'm talking about you have 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds wanting to hang out with your 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old child. Okay, that's a red flag. You need to pay attention to that. Everybody's not a mentor, okay? And like Tabitha said, when you see like much younger girls with much older men, now listen, we know, father-daughter time is great, right? But you need to pay attention to their interaction, right? Pay attention to the way that they're interacting with each other, the way he's touching her, the way she's responding to the touching. If you have kids that are walking around here, especially young girls with tattoos of flowers and berries and gentlemen and men's names on them, well, if they're under 18, who signed for you to get that tattoo? Right? These are different. I don't mean to, I'm freaking you out, Cindy. I'm sorry.
My daughter is clean on all of those things. I'm just, picturing all of this happening.
Their social media accounts are extremely important. A lot of the predators, they will sneak into the DMs, they will sneak into the chat rooms, and that's where 3 out of 4 children that are trafficked were recruited on social media.
Okay, I warn her about that all the time to the point where she thinks I'm crazy. This has been amazing. So much terrific information for our audience. And for all of you, now that we know the facts, scary as they may be, I trust that you will realize that we can all play a role in protecting our children, whether it's your own child or someone else's, from predators and preventing human trafficking. We must all know the signs and who we can report to. I'm going to give you all those numbers and websites in just a minute. I want to thank Jumorrow Terra Johnson, Marya Meyer, Lisa Manns, and Tabitha Bush for helping us navigate through this very important issue. To learn more about ending human trafficking, visit the Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign page at www.dhs.gov/blue-campaign. If you suspect human trafficking, text B-E-F-R-E-E, be free, or 233-733, or call 1-888-373-7888. The Women's Fund has many resources on their website, Women's Fund Miami, all one word, .org/stop-sex-trafficking, as does the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition at bhtc.org. Together, we can help stop this scourge. I've been your host, Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer. For this or any other episode of Future First, focus on Broward's children, go to our website, cscbroward.org, where you can access our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and remember to join us next time on Future First, focus on Broward's children.